Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Patricia Houston, and I just want to remind everybody that this Lunch and Learn is brought to you by family partners of Morris and Sussex counties. Today is joining me, Cecilia Gomez. Welcome, Cecilia.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. Cecilia is here from the Broca's Cancer Institute of New Jersey, and Cecilia is a community cancer control specialist. And today, actually, there at Broca's, she is the community outreach and engagement. And today, the topic that Cecilia is going to be discussing is about guts and glory, steps that you can take to protect yourself from colorectal cancer. So welcome, Cecilia, and you're more than welcome to take the lead.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and set up my screen. Like Patricia mentioned, today we are going to be talking about colorectal cancer prevention and risk reduction. And what we do at the Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey Outreach and Engagement Department is just, we love to educate people about steps that we can take to prevent some types of cancer. And one of those types of cancer is colorectal cancer. So just a disclaimer, this is not a substitute for a medical consult. You should always speak with a physician or a clinician or any health provider about specific health issues that you may have. And before we start the presentation, I would like to just do a pre-test. So I'm going to launch the poll. It should come up on your screen. And the first question is, more than 60% of colorectal cancers can be prevented in the US with screening. True or false? Number 2, fiber feeds the good bacteria in your gut. True or false? And number 3, stool-based testing that is completed on an annual basis is an effective screening tool for colorectal cancer. True or false? I'm just going to give everybody a few more seconds, and we are going to take this same test at the end of the presentation as well and go over those answers then. Okay, and it seems like the answers have stopped coming in, so thank you so much for participating, and we are going to move on with the presentation. So our objectives for today are for you to understand the risk factors for colorectal cancer, understand what your individual risk may be and the recommended age to start screening, and to develop an awareness of the current resources. And so we can't talk about colorectal cancer without talking about the colon. And the colon is made up of several different parts. It starts on the right-hand side of the body where the small intestine connects to the colon at the cecum. And the cecum is the first part of our colon that receives liquid food waste from the small intestine. So the liquid food waste is then moved up across the ascending colon. Then it moves across the transverse colon, down the descending colon, where it reaches the last 35 to 40 centimeters of the colon, which is called the sigmoid colon, and it almost looks like an S shape here. And then finally the rectum, where it is the storage site for waste, and then the anus eventually will expel the waste out of the system. And the colon is actually 5 feet long, so it takes up a lot of space in your body, and that's why it's so important to take good care of it through good nutrition and exercise. It's also 3 inches wide and muscular, and it's shaped like a hollow tube on the inside. And as we can see in this picture, this is a healthy colon that's pink, and it's free from any polyps. So what is colorectal cancer? It's exactly what it sounds like. It is cancer of the colon or rectum. And typically these cancers start from growths called polyps. And at first, these growths are usually benign, but they can turn cancerous. So over time, if they are not removed, they do pose the risk to form colorectal cancer. And it's actually the second leading cause of cancer death in men and women when the numbers are combined. And we're going to take a look at the inside of a colon here. And we're actually going to see a few polyps in this video. So this is what it may look like during a colonoscopy. And typically when these polyps are detected, your doctor will be able to remove them right away during the colonoscopy. And just like any type of cancer, colorectal cancer does have stages. So this is a representation of the different stages for colorectal cancer. At the far left, we have stage 0, which is referred to as carcinoma in situ. And this means that there are cells that are abnormal and they have the potential to turn cancerous, but they have not yet. The cancer is not growing at this time and has not penetrated through any layers of tissue. In stage 1 cancer, the cells are cancerous and they have started growing through the first layer of tissue, which is the mucosal layer of tissue. In stage 2 cancer, the cancer is growing deeper and it has grown through 2 layers, the mucosa and the submucosa, and is actually starting to impact the muscular layer of the colon as well. Stage 3 cancer grows through all 4 layers of tissue in the colon and is now impacting the lymph nodes and blood vessels. And stage 4 is where the cancer has metastasized and is able to travel to different parts of the body. This is when the cancer is most aggressive and difficult to treat. It is the most serious stage of cancer. So ideally, we want to catch cancer in stages 1 and 2 before it has started to impact the lymph nodes and metastasize. Most cases of colorectal cancer come from just being 50 years and older. It's about 40 to 60% of these cases that happen just due to growing older. And this is because as we age, our DNA cells in the colon are regenerating over and over and over again throughout the years. And that leaves a lot of room for error, unfortunately. And when something goes wrong within the DNA and our cells, that is when cancer can start to form. Because normally when cells grow old or they become damaged, they die off. But in cancer, those cells do not die and they just start to grow uncontrollably. There are also some genetic syndromes that can account for colorectal cancer. However, this is a much smaller percentage at only 4 to 6% of cases. And having a family member close to you that has had colorectal cancer also increases your risk of cancer as well. So we're going to talk about what to do if that is the case for you. Inflammatory bowel disease can also increase your risk for cancer due to inflammation in the colon. So if you have had a family member, family member, such as a mother, brother, sister, or father that has had colorectal cancer, your risk is about 2 times greater than someone who has not had a relative with colorectal cancer. So in this case, it is recommended that you start screening 10 years earlier than at the age they were diagnosed. So let's say your brother was diagnosed at age 50, you would have to start screening at 40. If they were diagnosed at 40, you would have to start screening at 30, and so on. And there are a few additional risk factors. It is important to note that African Americans and Hispanics tend to be diagnosed at later stages. This is likely due to disparities in the healthcare system that impact their access to quality care and prevention that these individuals experience. Additionally, a body mass index that indicates obesity can increase your risk for colorectal cancer by actually 5% for every 5-point increase in BMI. And this is likely due to the inflammatory state that obesity can cause. It causes a lot of chronic inflammation. It's also possible that people who have obesity have similar lifestyle factors that can increase risk for colorectal cancer, such as poor nutrition. And a personal history of radiation to the pelvic area or other types of cancer can increase your risk for not only colorectal cancer, but other types of cancer as well. And now, smoking is actually a very big risk factor as well for colorectal cancer. I think many people associate smoking with lung cancer, which of course is true, but is actually highly associated with colorectal cancer. And smokers who are diagnosed with cancer have a lower chance at survivorship than non-smokers. So they have a poorer prognosis. And this increases if you also drink alcohol. So even just a light amount of alcohol use, as we see on this chart, can increase your risk for colorectal cancer. And it only increases the more alcohol use that one has. So it's recommended that women have no more than 1 drink per day and men have no more than 2 drinks per day. And a drink is typically equal to about 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, 8 to 9 ounces of malt liquor, and a 1.5 ounce shot of liquor. And of course, there are some foods that we can avoid. So red meat is not technically a carcinogen, meaning that it is directly associated with cancer. However, there is evidence that excess red meat consumption is a probable cause of colorectal cancer. However, red meat can be part of a healthy diet if we are consuming it sparingly. You know, it has iron, it has B vitamins that some people may benefit from if they do choose to eat red meat, but we recommend eating no more than 3 4 to 6 ounce servings of red meat per week. So that's about a serving size that's about the size of the palm of your hand. Is usually going to be about 4 to 6 ounces for most people, no more than 3 times a week. And so we also have processed red meats, and processed red meats are a carcinogen, meaning there is definitive research that shows that it causes colorectal cancer. And this is due to the nitrates that are found in red meats, such as sausages, hot dogs, kielbasa, as well as deli meats like ham, turkey, salami, bologna, and pepperoni. The high amount of salt in these can actually also cause stomach cancer. So we really want to avoid consuming processed red meat whenever possible. There's actually evidence that shows that having 1 serving of processed red meat a day, that's equal to 50 grams, which would be, for example, a hot dog or 2 slices of deli meat, can increase your risk of colorectal cancer by 18%, which is quite a bit. And so you might be wondering what the symptoms of colorectal cancer are. And unfortunately, colorectal cancer is usually a very silent type of cancer until the later stages 3 and 4, where cancer has progressed and symptoms can start to appear. But regardless, some of the symptoms are fatigue, changes in stool, especially if you notice that the shape has become narrower. And this is because when cancer starts to grow in our colon, the stool has to start squeezing past the growth in our colon. So the shape changes, and also blood in the stool is something to look out for. Bloating, cramping, abdominal pain, and weight loss or appetite changes can also be symptoms. But there is good news. Colorectal cancer can actually be prevented through screenings. Up to 60% of cases can actually be prevented. So who should be screened? At age 45, those without a family history should be screened. Again, if you do have that first-degree relative, such as mother or brother, sister, father, you would start screening 10 years earlier than when they were diagnosed. But those without a family history or genetic conditions or otherwise other risk factors can start screening at 45. And screening then continues until about age 75. Between ages 76 and 85, it's up to the patient and doctor to make a decision about whether they want to continue screening. They're going to look at your screening history, your family history, your lifestyle factors, and decide whether or not it's worth it to continue screening. After age 85, screening is no longer recommended. And this is because once we get to the progressed age, it's really more about there being more risk than benefits to screening. Because screening, for example, it is an invasive procedure. A colonoscopy is an invasive procedure, which can then pose risk due to the anesthesia and entering the body. So it's up to the patient if they would like to continue, but most doctors do recommend stopping screening. And so there are a few types of colorectal cancer screening options. There are stool-based tests, such as a FIT test or a stool DNA test, and these need to be done annually in order to be effective. There is a sigmoidoscopy, which is similar to a colonoscopy, which is done, but this is done every 5 years instead of every 10 years. And there is, of course, the colonoscopy, which is recommended every 10 years. And the colonoscopy is considered to be the gold standard. This is going to give us the clearest image of what's going on inside of the colon so that we can see and detect and remove any polyps or any cancer growth. We're going to talk a little bit more about the types of screening. So an FOBT test is a fecal occult blood test, and it's used to detect blood in your stool that you might not be able to see yourself. So there are a few pros and cons to this. The FOBT test is typically associated with false positives, and a false positive can cause a lot of stress. And if you do have a positive test, you are advised to go in for a colonoscopy to make sure to see what's going on. And also, blood in the stool may not always be because of colorectal cancer. It could be due to hemorrhoids or other non-life-threatening issues. We also have a FIT test, which is a fecal immunochemical test. And this is going to look for antibodies to detect blood from polyps or cancer. And it is similar to an FOBT test. It is slightly more effective when combined with a sigmoidoscopy every 5 years, but it is still recommended that this is done annually. And again, these do have a tendency to create false positive results. So just to reiterate, they do need to be done annually. And then we also have the Cologuard, which is a multi-targeted stool DNA test. And this is going to look at an entire bowel movement as opposed to just a sample. And the manufacturer of Cologuard recommends doing this every 3 years as opposed to every year. It's going to look for altered DNA, which may indicate a polyps or cancer cells. We also have a flexible sigmoidoscopy. So this is very similar to a colonoscopy, in which a thin tube is inserted into the rectum to visually inspect the rectum and the sigmoid colon. So if you remember, the sigmoid colon is only about every 30 to 40 the last 30 to 40 centimeters of the colon. And it is home to about 50% of all colorectal cancer. So this is why this may be a good option. It's fairly quick, and it does not require anesthesia, although you can opt for it if you choose. And this is slightly more effective, again, when combined with an annual fecal testing. I mentioned earlier that the colonoscopy is the gold standard. This is going to give us the most effective picture of what's going on inside the colon, and usually doctors can right then and there remove the polyp before it becomes cancerous. It's recommended at every 10 years. Some doctors may recommend every 5 years according to your history, but typically 10 years is the general rule of thumb, just because colorectal cancer does take 10 years to develop. So it is a slow growing cancer. And as long as you're going every 10 years for your colonoscopy, or you're doing your other forms of screening, then you have a great chance of catching cancer before it develops or before it gets too aggressive. And now there are some diet and exercise lifestyle habits that can reduce your colorectal cancer risk. Exercise can reduce certain cancers, not just colorectal cancer, but most cancers are associated at a reduced risk for people who exercise frequently. This is because exercise lowers your sex hormones like estrogen and growth factors that have been directly linked to colon and breast cancers. It lowers inflammation, which can cause cancer. It also increases the transit time of food, so it speeds up your digestion. And this is important because then your gastrointestinal system is exposed to fewer carcinogens. So any pesticides, herbicides, or heavy metals that you may have consumed during the day are going to spend less time in our bodies because we have an effective digestive system, and as long as we're having those regular bowel movements every day, that's our body's natural way of detoxing. So the recommendation for adults is 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio exercise. So power walking, riding a bike, going for a jog, and that's 150 minutes, but that can be broken up. Most people break it up into 30 minutes, 5 days a week. You can even do, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes after lunch, and 10 minutes after work, if that works for you. And then on top of that, we also want 2 days of strength training. So this can be body weight movements like the man in the picture is doing a plank, things like push-ups, squats, or it could be lifting weights. But anything that is going to work your muscles is extremely important because we want to maintain as much muscle mass as possible. Muscle is going to make sure that we're maintaining a healthy weight by ensuring that our metabolism is healthy, and because it is a metabolically active tissue. So it's going to really help just ensure that we're maintaining a healthy weight and we have energy. And actually, there is research that shows that people who, if and when they are diagnosed with cancer, if they have a higher percentage of lean muscle mass, they have a higher chance at survivorship. And now fiber is actually extremely important in terms of reducing your risk of colorectal cancer. Fiber almost acts as a vacuum cleaner through your colon. It's going to bind to any toxins that you may have ingested, again, herbicides, pesticides, and make sure that they are bound to the stool, and then that stool is expelled through a bowel movement. There are many sources of fiber. It's always going to be a plant-based food that gives you fiber. So whole grains, vegetables, fruit, nuts, and seeds are all great options. And in addition to binding and transporting toxins out of the body, fiber also helps to control blood sugar, and helping to maintain healthy blood sugar levels is extremely important because that's going to, again, lower inflammation levels. And inflammation is a risk for colorectal cancer and other types of cancer as well. It also increases the bulk of your stool so that you have when you have a bulkier stool, it tends to pass a little bit easier through your digestive system. So again, helping to maintain regular bowel movements. Fiber also feeds the good bacteria in our gut. So our digestive system actually cannot digest fiber by itself. Fiber is not digested until it gets to our colon, where the bacteria that reside in our colon there use it as food, and they actually end up fermenting this fiber, and this creates a short chain fatty acids that can actually slow down cancer cells from growing or slow down tumor growth as well. So whenever you're grocery shopping, you're choosing snacks or your products, you want to check the fiber content. It's always going to be on the nutrition facts label under total carbohydrates. And you want to try and choose products that have at least 5 grams or more per serving. So here we have 4 grams of fiber, which isn't too bad. It's better than 0. But the recommended amount of fiber per day is 30 grams. So if we're getting products that have at least 5 grams or more per serving, we're really setting ourselves up for success there. And beans are one of the best sources of fiber that we have. Beans usually have about 15 grams of fiber per cup, which is about half of your daily fiber intake. So if you're not somebody who eats a lot of fiber, you definitely don't want to right away start eating cups of beans. You want to start very slowly, adding just a couple of grams per week and make sure that that feels good before you increase again the next week. And also making sure that we're hydrated, because fiber is going to absorb water to help be digested, and also making sure that you're exercising, because again, exercise can help with digestion as well. And this is very interesting. So there's actually research that shows that coffee can reduce the number of deaths from colorectal cancer by 18%, which is huge. And this is because coffee comes from a plant. It comes from the coffee bean, which has plenty of antioxidants and phytochemicals. So if you're a coffee drinker, about 1 to 2 cups of coffee a day has been shown to provide these benefits. But you want to be mindful of not adding too much sugar or syrup, because then we are starting to add excess sugar, which can pose a risk for inflammation. And if you're not a coffee drinker, that's perfectly fine, because you still get antioxidants and phytochemicals from eating a healthy diet. Fruits, vegetables, nuts, beans, healthy fats are all going to help you get these benefits as well. And so luckily here in New Jersey, we have wonderful resources. So we have NJ Seed, which is the NJ Cancer Education and Early Detection Program, which works to help people have information and education about the preventable types of cancer, which are cancers that you can screen for. And they are breast, cervical, colorectal, prostate, and also skin and lung cancer. So if you or somebody you know needs help accessing these resources, you can actually reach out to our patient navigation team at the Rutgers Cancer Institute. And what our patient navigators do is actually work one-on-one with people who need help getting to cancer screenings, and they connect them to clinics where they can get those screenings at. Usually it's an NJ Seed clinic. And they help to work past any barriers that that person may be having. So whether it's transportation barrier, a language barrier, whether that person is underinsured or uninsured, or whether they are undocumented, they are able to help people get those screenings. So I will put this email in the chat at the end of my presentation. So in summary, perhaps the most important thing that people can do to prevent colorectal cancer is get screened. Whatever screening method they may choose, as long as they are doing it regularly, they have a wonderful chance of preventing or catching colorectal cancer in its early stages. You want to eat a fiber-rich diet, at least 30 grams of fiber per day, whether it's coming from beans or fruits or vegetables. Fiber is really going to be able to give you those benefits of the short-chain fatty acids that can slow cancer growth. And finally, exercise. So at least 150 minutes of moderate intensity cardio per week and 2 days of strength training. And I'm going to go ahead and do our post-test before we move on to questions. So it is the same questions as the beginning of our presentation. And if you could just go ahead and submit your answers, it should have come up on your screen. So question 1 is more than 60% of colorectal cancers can be prevented in the US with screening, true or false? Number 2, fiber feeds the good bacteria in your gut, true or false? And number 3, stool-based testing that is completed on an annual basis is an effective screening tool for colorectal cancer. True or false? Give everybody a few moments. Does anybody need more time? Okay, so number one, more than 60% of colorectal cancers can be prevented in the US with screening. This is true. Number two, fiber feeds the good bacteria in your gut. This is also true. And number three, stool-based testing completed on an annual basis is an effective screening tool for colorectal cancer. This is always true. It does need to be done annually, and many doctors will recommend combining it with a sigmoidoscopy every 5 years in order to make sure we're setting ourselves up for success. Okay, thank you everybody for submitting your responses. I'm also going to ask that everybody take a moment to complete this anonymous survey. It's really important for us that we get your feedback so that we can continue making these programs the best that they can be, and we can continue educating people about the resources that are out there and the steps that they could take to reduce their risk for cancers. So I'll put this link in the chat in a moment, and I believe we can go ahead and take questions now. Thank you so much, everybody.
With that, we are going to conclude this session. We're going to move to our Q&A session. But before we go there, Cecilia, any final thoughts that you would like to share in here?
Well, once I stop sharing, I'll go ahead and I'll be able to put all of these resources that I mentioned in the chat. I'll put our patient navigation team email. I'll put our outreach and engagement department email. So if you are interested in possibly having this program come to your organization, you can reach out to us there and request a workshop. And then I'll also go ahead and put our anonymous survey in there as well.
Awesome. And I just want to remind everybody that in relation to contact information and anything that you would like to know in relation to this presentation, it's going to be in the description box of this video. So if you didn't have a time to write down the information, all that information is going to be in this video. With that, we are going to conclude. Thank you very much, everybody.